Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, as you see what's going on our lovely island of Fawn. Hello, today we're relaxing as per usual, have a big stretch. Was considering streaming today, didn't end up doing it because was a little bit busy in the end. But that's okay. Christmas tree all nicely decorated. And you might be like, it's a little bit late, like weren't you meant to do it last week or something, 1st of December when decorations come up, but there. In my mind, as long as it's before Christmas, that's like more of a hard deadline, if anything, isn't it? Anyway, hello everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow at 6:07 PM on Sunday, December 8th, 2024. Not sure what to speak of today. I spent a decent amount of today sort of catching up on like events and things which I was missing out on in like some of the games I was playing. So I've like finally finished Arpeggio. Whoa, a huge temporal leap. Apologise. But yes, I don't know what we're going to talk about today, as most days. I don't really know what we're going to talk about, so excuse me. Yeah, I was catching up on those Sender Zone Zero events. Oh my god, had to forgive me. My throat was just like blah at that moment. But I was playing their new, or not new anymore, it's more like 4 weeks old event, Arpeggio Vault. I don't know exactly what it's called. It was interesting. It was, again, I feel like this very much ties into that conversation I had before about when I was talking about the escape room, which had no feedback on whether you got the thing right or wrong. This was interesting because it's kind of like a roguelite, the new mode they introduced, except it's a roguelite which doesn't allow you to really snowball, which is honestly kind of a most fun part of roguelites, isn't it? That sort of like power fantasy of like I've made this like weird gimmick work, and then I've become like an unstoppable machine where everything just works in perfect unity to be able to destroy things. It's my criticism of this event. I know the TV events are sort of like controversial, I suppose, in the first place, but I really enjoy the puzzly ones, which appear sometimes in that game. Sorry, this is like such niche knowledge if you don't play Sender Zone Zero. Essentially, Sender Zone Zero is kind of like a combo-based battler, is probably how I describe it. Like, think like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta-esque sort of gameplay, but with a gacha structure over the top of it. But they also have like two sort of modes. They have like that main combat mode, and then they have a TV mode, which is kind of like an overworld. Think of it as like a tile-based overworld, hub world sort of thing, where you can navigate around it and interact with things there. And the combat gameplay is really quite a lot of fun, and the TV-based gameplay has been sort of hit and miss a lot of the time. And the main complaint I had with it before was basically it just took way too long to do anything. Animations took so long, and then it would constantly pause and stop the flow of action. And then sometimes when it wouldn't stop the flow of action, there'd just be conversation text box in the top from the characters, like depicting lore or whatever, but it would be so easy to miss because it would just be there for like a second and then it'll be gone. And it just sort of meant like that I manually was stopping the action because I had stopped to read exactly what was going on. It's a bit difficult to try and figure out a puzzle while also reading that, which led to like a really weird imbalance. So they've been experimenting very much with this TV mode, as they've called it, to see what they can do with it. And I feel like a lot of the sort of side quests they have, which are sort of puzzly, I think are really quite a lot of fun. There's one they had recently called, I can't remember what it was called, Camellia Week or something, where it's basically sort of like a continuous open world exploration thing, where you have a load of like these sort of fun gimmicky mini games to play within it, which I thought like, this is cool. And Arpeggio Vault, I think, is expanding on it a bit more with this like sort of roguelike mode, which has potential to be really good, but for some reason they did this bizarre choice of basically having to stop and restart every 2 levels or something, which basically kills all momentum immediately. Like, just as you think your run's starting to get good, you're starting to pop off, you got the synergies going, immediately stops, and you don't get to feel any satisfaction from it. It's interesting to think about. You know, I've definitely been thinking a lot more about sort of game design perspective, especially with recent D&D things not being quite up to the standard I'd like to hold things up to. But it's very interesting because like me playing it, I'm just like, why would you not sit there and reward a player for what they've worked hard for? Is this sort of moment where everything breaks and you feel unstoppable. So yeah, but I understand how it's difficult to over time. I would say probably a bit less difficult when you have an entire team and presumably a QA session compared to the things that happen in D&D, but still, it's just, I don't know. Anyway, I made my way through that story basically by abusing Nicole plus, I shouldn't say it like that, abusing the mechanics that Nicole plus Necomata bring, which is basically that one of the units, you can bring along like units to bring along with you in combat. One of the units, like her damage scales with how much money you have, and the other unit has a chance of dropping money every time she attacks, and then just amassing a huge amount of money from my talent tree, and then basically that's what happened. Money and health, and then that character just sweeps through everything, which is interesting because it's like so because like there's a lot of game design which I'm now like sort of dissecting here, which I didn't really think about more until I spoke about it in this moment. But I ended up using that strategy, one, because it's incredibly strong and is a great power fantasy, being able to sort of spiral out control of this character, just basically one-shotting every enemy it comes across. But two, it's also, you kind of need it towards the end, because the final world, they have it as, the gimmick of that world is basically huge amounts of enemy spawn, but it's so easily to just get into there and just immediately die, because you don't have that much control over what your companions you bring along do. They sort of act automatically. And there was like a few situations where I tried a different strategy and, you know, loaded into world and then basically died within like less than a quarter of a floor, because I was like, I don't have a damage to get past this part or something, or like my companions just like started attacking randomly and then they lost all their HP. At least with the sort of like money strategy, the Denny strategy. No, it's not called Denny. We've got a gold coin strategy. You can actually scale up. It's just way too strong because you can scale up really quickly at the same time as it being incredibly strong. So it's interesting because from a game design perspective, but certainly it's a failure, isn't it? Where people feel pressured into doing the most optimal strategy instead of strategies that maybe are less optimal but more fun for them, because they cannot take those less optimal strategies, even with some more efficiency with them, to actually complete what they want. Now, I'm sure you can, absolutely, but me as like an average player couldn't. I was getting super confused when I was basically doing like these secret levels, which happens after the main story of a quest, and I was just like, I cannot get anywhere in this secret level. I just like immediately die. Not immediately die. I've always thought it would be the same for any of them. Actually, this did happen in one of them. I immediately died. I spawned in and I moved right, and when it trapped, I didn't realize I was spawned in like on top of an enemy. I trapped myself behind an enemy and I couldn't kill the enemy, and for some reason my companions didn't do anything. So that was actually like a soft lock, but whatever. So yeah, I don't know what to think. But I mean, that's kind of a point. You know, I respect the game for experimenting and trying something different with it. There were definitely bits of it, like when I first started, I was like, this is kind of cool, but it's interesting, not amusing, that's the wrong word. It's interesting how just like a small change can make a really big impact on the entire field of experience. Because if they basically had like each subworld split into these like 5 mini levels where you play like 2 floors each of each level, you know, which is kind of cool. But like the fact it resets on every single thing so quickly kills all momentum just immediately that you build up. Like imagine playing Binding of Isaac, but every time you got to a new like not hub world, but like imagine going from like basement to caves to, I can't remember what it's called, Necropolis or something. It would reset all your items and your damage and that sort of thing, as if you were starting a new run. That's kind of what it felt like, which is a real shame, because I was like, it definitely has potential. It just like, that was the wrong execution of it. And part of me sort of just sits here wondering, being like, I wonder if that means they're going to get rid of it. And I'm like, that's not the response I wanted, because I actually did kind of enjoy it. Just I feel like it had this one fatal flaw, which ended up being sort of very iffy for the experience. And that happens. That absolutely happens. You know, you can't. The only way you can get the sort of public QA testing that an entire population of a game can get you is by releasing it to an entire population of a game. It's unreasonable to expect that you'll get like millions of QAs, unlike what you would get when you actually release something for live, which it's almost like a shame, isn't it? That not so much that things have to release in an imperfect condition, but the fact that it's like there's only so much you can do without feedback. Like, I mean, I think it's unreasonable to expect us all to be omnipotent and just see the immediate problems with any sort of thing you try to create or release. That's wholly unreasonable. You can only see things through the testing, QA, feedback, etc., etc. But in a lot of situations, probably not so much a case in Hoyoverse's case, because they have presumably the resources to be able to fund a large QA department, but at least for like an individual, right, you know, you don't know how things are going to be received because you can't QA them. You don't have that audience for it, that pool that people have ready to give this sort of like constructive criticism and feedback for. But yeah, this really reminds me of just like some random, I think it was CBBC show I watched, I don't remember what it was, about some kids who got to play test games or something. And I remember being like really envious, being like, I want to do that because I want to play games. But, you know, QA is quite like a thankless job at the end of the day, and oftentimes the first one to get cut, as I understand it, from companies, which is definitely a real shame, because it's a really important part of being able to understand. It's very easy to get sort of caught up in your own mini scope when you don't have the outside perspective of like fresh eyes coming in. Because fresh eyes are often what interacts with whatever you're creating in the first place, right? When you create a movie, when you create a TV show, you're thinking about what it looks like from the perspective of someone who has no investment in it, has no idea what's going on, and is like clicking on it just to see what happens. That is a perspective you got to think about, because I mean that is ultimately what you're trying to appeal to, right? And where that sort of comes the difficulty, because you yourself cannot be that new person. You yourself cannot be the person with fresh eyes looking at whatever's going on, because you don't know. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say about it except for that's it, right? It's difficult to sort of figure out. It'd be nice if you could sort of like wipe your memory's a bit strong, but sort of forget everything and just interact with it again so you can see things from your own eyes. Or like temporarily forget everything, interact with it, and then come back and be able to figure out what's going on again. Because if you could, then you would have both the knowledge of exactly what's going on with it, the thought process behind it, as well as a new person experience. But you don't get to have that. You can only have one or the other. Such is the cruelty of life. It's not really that cruel, to be honest. I suppose it's to be expected, quite literally, than one of the more realistic things, if anything. But still, I don't really know where I was going with this, except for like, I don't know, playtesting, QAing. It's difficult, not easy to do. Certainly something which has an inherent sort of, I'm not sure contradiction's the right word, because it's not really a contradiction, the fact that the most experienced person for QAing would be yourself, if only you didn't have all that experience with it in the first place. That's just, I mean, me saying it out loud like that, I just sort of go like, well, yeah, duh. But at the same time, it's sort of like it's a shame, ain't it? Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this sort of thing, which I think is definitely very possible, very fair. But it's a sort of thing where I'm just like, you know, wouldn't it be nice, is perhaps a better way to put it. Wouldn't it be nice to live forever? Wouldn't it be nice to something. I don't know the lyrics to the song. But yeah, you can't. So that's just kind of what you got to deal with, I suppose. It is as life is. No more, no less. But wouldn't it be cool though? Now, let's say live in this hypothetical scenario where you could temporarily like withhold your own memories of experiencing something, so you can have a look at something with fresh eyes again, and then you can restore your memories to be able to sort of combine the best of both worlds of understanding the new player's perspective as well as your current experience perspective. That'd be good. Like, I imagine it must go like triply so with things like puzzle design and puzzle games, right? Because it must be so difficult to be able to design a puzzle and then look at it with fresh eyes. Like, that's essentially impossible, right? I don't know if it's even if it is possible to basically look at a puzzle as if you've never seen it before, no matter how much you might try. I mean, like, I've got first-hand experience of this. Long story short, we did an escape room like a year or two ago or something, and then a friend wanted to book an escape room, accidentally booked the wrong one, and it was the one that we'd done before, but it was sort of like a slightly different crowd, if anything, and I remembered basically every single puzzle which was in it, so I just sort of like kept my mouth shut until like we were really stuck or anything, or just gave like vague hints here and there. But interestingly, at least from my friend's perspective, he didn't remember most of the puzzle, so if anything, that's kind of like a beneficial part for him. And, you know, it was basically impossible for me to pretend like I didn't know the solutions to the puzzles, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, my brain immediately went, and that's what you do. And then there goes all the joy, I suppose, of trying to figure out, discover, put together the pieces of what comes next. That is just, you just know the answer. And you know it. I think it's not so much about thinking of the answer is the bad part. It's more like that you doing it before means you know it's the answer is a bad part, right? Because there's been plenty of times when you work on a puzzle and you think of something and you're like, oh, this must be the solution. And then you sort of backtrack a little bit, being like, oh, that didn't get me what I wanted, that must not be the solution. But if you went into it and you had like a little pop-up that went, yes, you are on the right track, that would take the joy out of it, wouldn't it? Because you'd be like, oh yeah, now I know I'm on the right track. There is no backtracking here. It's like I've reached a checkpoint, except for you don't really need that in a puzzle game unless you're solving like an insanely long puzzle, right? You're just doing a little small portion of it. Where am I going with this? I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking about it, to be honest. Yeah. On that note, I guess I'll round this episode off here. I don't know what else I'm going to talk about, to be honest. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.